And it looks like we are recording. And if not, I guess we're just gonna have to do it again.
Perfect. Then we'll just wait another like 4 months and then we'll do it again.
Like I said, time, we have time.
Yeah.
I'll introduce the show and then I want to talk about time. Hi everyone, my name is Kim Hess. Welcome to this moment in history. I am your friendly neighborhood anthropologist, and today we have a lovely guest who I am loving so much. So please don't mind if I just throw out compliments to her throughout our time together. Just agree with me. So I'm going to have Jillian introduce herself, and then we're gonna get chatting. Jillian, it's all yours.
Well, first, thank you so much for inviting me to do this with you. And also thank you for your grace with the number of reschedules that I put on this. I'm super excited that we found time. So my name is Jillian Hubbard. I am a diversity, equity, inclusion consultant, and I also do work in talent development and organization development. So I work with organizations primarily right now in the nonprofit and education space to support them in creating more inclusive and equitable environments for both the people that are working within their organizations as well as the people who are their external stakeholders and the folks who they serve. And so that's what I do. I am a native Bostonian, and I'm actually back in Boston now, but I currently live just outside of Washington, D.C. in Arlington, Virginia. I'm a massive dog lover, a massive cheese lover, and a New England sports fan. So I'm sorry for anybody who is unhappy with the Patriots at whatever moment in time you're watching this.
I know nothing about football except that I want to go tailgating. That's it.
Best experience. I mean, I also go with my dad, and he's very big into like food and wine and all that kind of stuff. So when we go, it's like a whole parade with like, we've got like the tent in the back, and we've got like coffee and Kahlua, and then we've got like, I don't know, he'll make like carnitas and all kinds of things. So ours might be a little bit more fun than most people's from the food perspective.
I'm going to have to invite myself to one of your father's tailgatings.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Maybe a nice Cabernet.
Oh yeah, he's gonna be like, which one? Narrow it down.
Like whichever one I find. I'm not exactly. It's so funny. I was talking to my boyfriend Joseph yesterday because I had tried this new cheese, and I'm going to butcher their name. It starts with a W, a wine way. I don't know. I have to look it up. I found it at Sprouts, but it had blueberries in it. So yesterday we had this white cheese with blueberries. It was delicious, and then we had like sun-dried tomato crackers. And he was like, "Wow, this is like a 49ers tailgate." And I was like, what are you talking about? Because he used to tailgate with the Oakland Raiders before they moved to Vegas. And I guess they had pretty big blowouts with ice sculptures you pour Hennessy down and get the sculpture and prime rib. And I was like,
oh, wow.
Oh my God. Like I've never went to an Oakland game, so I completely missed it, and I'll never have that chance again. But he said that Oakland Raiders fans would make fun of San Francisco 49ers fans by saying their tailgating parties had like wine and cheese. And I was like, I resent that. I think I would like wine and cheese at a football game. And so obviously I found my people with you and your dad.
Exactly. So yeah, we've got these synergies that we always keep finding between us. And I also will say that if I get to see an ice sculpture with like prime rib somewhere involved, I would be more than happy to partake.
What? And I guess when I say ice sculpture, it sounds very fancy, but evidently the police came around and told them no more because everyone was getting drunk. Because everyone wanted, I guess it was kind of like, what's it called? A cake stand.
Oh,
you know how
yeah.
You see the frat boys doing the cake stand? It was just a fancy cake stand. So they pour whatever alcohol and it would swirl down this ice sculpture. And You, yeah, I was like, what was I doing during this time?
Oh, it's amazing.
Watching Netflix, I don't know. Anyway.
I love that we're starting out here, and I'm like, I'm a consultant. In 5 minutes, let's talk about our tailgating experiences. Right? Wonderful.
Well, and this is a thing that you and I were talking about off camera, is being authentic and bringing our whole selves and our true selves to work. And we were talking about that because I am dressed, you know, like I'm about to go salsa dancing. I can't salsa though. And how I'm working on being more authentic in my work. And especially the work that you do. I am also a diversity consultant. It's time for us to be more authentic so other people can feel like they can belong and be more authentic, whatever their work is. And you, I know you and I won't speak for you, but I know at least myself, when we do this work and when we interview people, mainly women, mainly people of color or LGBTQ, you know, we find that they don't feel like they belong. They don't feel like they can bring their authentic selves. And you and I are joking around about, you know, keg stands and, you know, football, but imagine not being, you know, I imagine not being able to have my partner's picture on my desk if we were in a same-sex relationship, for fear that people would, you know, that could affect my job. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's, I mean, underlying what I do is ultimately why I do it. And a lot of that is really because I want to create spaces where people can show up as their full selves, you know, be valued for what they contribute and add to their places of work and the communities that they're in, and also feel like they themselves are contributing to a cause that means something to them and are using their strengths to do that. So, you know, I mean, that's the concept of authenticity in how we show up both in work and in our own personal lives and communities is a near and dear topic to my heart. So I hear you on that too. And it's also something that I know we were talking about this off camera, but it's also something that I'm working on as well, of, you know, how do I bridge who I am as just Jillian Hubbard in my life with who I am, Jillian Hubbard, in my work. Recently, probably the most common feedback that I've been getting from colleagues who I work with is, we'll do an engagement with a client and then I'll get off camera and then I'll just, curtain comes down and it's however I feel and what I'm thinking. And they were like, where was she 10 minutes ago when we were in that session? So yeah, so I mean, it's funny because there's the parallel process of being able to create those spaces for other people, which on one level does mean I create that space. And so I want there to be less of me and more of you. But at the same time, there's the value of what it means for me to bring my full self into that space as well, and how that then models and enables other people to do that too.
Oh, wow. That is so well put. So as far as you, when you're working, the feedback you're getting, do you feel like you are, I don't want to say purposefully, but for lack of a better word, are you purposefully holding back, or are you just observing and kind of processing while you're working, or is it both?
Yeah, so I definitely am quieter. I'm a light facilitator. When I do workshops and things like that, I'm very light. I like to create space for people to really just show up as themselves and bring their own expertise, knowledge, questions, all of that to the space. So I do end up being more quiet. I think where I find myself, I don't know if it's censoring, but where I do find myself being less of who I would normally be once, you know, the session is over and I'm talking with my colleagues, is in thinking, it's a mix of thinking about where is this particular person or client system at right now? What's the most useful thing that I can offer to them? How can I do it in a way that is clear and succinct? And how can I do it in a way that's going to help them get to where they want to go? So the thought processes that go on in my mind to get a very clear message out ends up probably making me be a little bit more reserved, or, you know, a little shorter in my words. And because me outside of work is like, I'm messy. I'll say like and 800 times. Whoever is listening to this is going to hear me say like and so about 800 times. there it is again. And I'm gonna, and I'm not gonna present things perfectly, and it'll take me, I'm also an external processor. It'll take me a little while to get to whatever the point is that I want to get to. So I think in a way, it's like my own, sometimes it's also my own desire to perform in that space. It's, I've come in as a consultant. How do I, build credibility here in a space, especially if I'm just starting work with you? How do you trust me? And what can you expect from me if I'm going to work with you? So those are the first ones that come to mind, but it's also a very big and good question to unpack and explore.
Wow, that is. And I love that you're very, very conscious and aware of how you process things. So I believe that some people may find they might not know how they process things. So when they get feedback from others, they may take it as a negative just because they don't know how their own brain works. And that's something that I'm working with. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I love that you know that. And so how did you start with consulting? Oh, and before you say that, I want to say your website is beautiful.
Thank you. That's a shout out to Ali Wachtel, who designed that whole thing and took all of whatever was going on in my head and made it into something clean and crisp. So.
And what's your website again?
So it's JillianHconsulting.com.
Okay. So JillianHconsulting.com. Everyone listening and watching, go, and that's go and poke around and hire Jillian, refer her. But I went to it and I was clean and crisp is the perfect words for that. And it also seems to really reflect who you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so this is also a plug for Ali. She is one of the reasons that I love working with her is, and I have a couple of other colleagues who shared this feedback with me about her. And then I was like, oh yes, this is exactly the experience I got. But she does an incredible job of kind of going through this discovery process with you, where you basically share, this is who I am, this is what my business is. And she will distill it into like some really crisp language that for me, I mean, I hate writing bios about myself. I designed my first website and it was just stacks of words. It was just way too much. And also I think that one of the challenges that people have, especially as solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, independent consultants, people who are really promoting themselves, is being able to really look at yourself in a way of like, okay, who am I actually? And that piece of like translating who am I and who do I see myself as to something that's actually something that other people can connect with in a really clear way. That piece in the middle, that translation piece, is extremely challenging, at least for me. Because it requires you to look at yourself, not with all of the things that you think you could be doing better or the places that you wished you could get to, but you're not there yet, but really just like, who am I now and what am I conveying to the people who would be interested in working with me? She does an amazing job of that. So go check out Ali Wachtel. She's amazing. I'll send you her name and you can post it in any notes you got or anything.
I will, and call her myself.
Oh yeah, yes. Happy to connect you too.
Definitely wanted to give you that plug because your website is amazing. But going back to my initial question of how did you get started in this crazy world of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah. So it is definitely full of surprises every single day. So I would say that what got me, the initial life experience that got me interested in doing this work is just the experience I had of being a young person growing up in Massachusetts. I lived in Boston and I was part of the METCO program, which essentially is one of the longest standing voluntary busing programs in the country. And it bused me from my predominantly Black and Hispanic neighborhood in Boston out to a predominantly white Jewish suburb in Newton, Massachusetts. So the experience of being someone who's a light-skinned Black woman whose parents are from the West Coast and trying to find a way to fit into my own neighborhood in Boston and then also trying to find a way to fit into this community in Newton was just, it provided a lot of formative experiences for me. And in my senior year of high school, we had a class called leadership that helped us focus on and learn about different isms in our society, power, prejudice, racism, all of those kinds of things. And it was really the first time that I was able to put language to those experiences that I had. And I also have the fortune of having a godmother who does work in diversity, equity, inclusion. And so as I really started to dig into some of these topics more, my mom was like, your godmother does this for a living. You can talk to her about what this looks like. And so when I realized, this is actually something I can do for a career, it doesn't just have to be this thing that I'm super passionate about and interested in, that really sparked the whole thing. And it just kind of took off from there.
So you started very young, knowing that this is what you wanted to do.
Wouldn't totally say I knew it was what I wanted to do. I knew I was interested in it. Like by the time I got to college, I was that person that had a list of 20 different possibilities for what my major was going to be and didn't figure it out until the last minute. Ended up making my own in multicultural studies. And then afterwards still was completely unsure of what I wanted to do. So wouldn't say I knew, but it has been like probably one of my most long-standing interests. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. I guess I didn't let our audience know how we know each other. We know each other by working together, being consultants. We've worked on, a very, I don't know if we're allowed, we should be allowed to say, since, is it over? Are we allowed to say who the client is?
We may as well keep it, maybe we'll just say larger pieces of the project.
Worked for a very prestigious, influential client together that both of us know the founder of the consulting firm that we were consulting with, and Jillian and I remember you, I think we initially met because it was Zoom, it was still COVID. And I remember you reaching out to me and saying, hey, do you want to chat? And I was like, yeah. I've never had another consultant do that. I've never had another consultant, reach out and just not chat about work, but just to get to know one another. And I was like, this woman is brilliant. I really like her. So from there.
Well, I appreciate that, first of all. And I was also equally enlivened by your response, which was enthusiastic and yes, just like you did here, which I felt through your text message back. So, I've also just considered it a huge privilege to work with you. And I'm so glad that we're in community. I think that this is kind of part of what the work is, of course.
and that's the thing, since I have been consulting, I feel like the consultants that I work with, I was working with another company yesterday, and one of the principals was saying, it is such a privilege to be able to work with people you want to work with.
Yes.
My entire life, no offense to the people that I have worked with, I have never gotten to choose who I want to work with. And so now that I have this opportunity, I'm like, these consultants are amazing. And I think because so many of the consultants that you and I work with put their whole selves into it, they want to make, as cliche as it sounds, they want to make the world a better place. They want racial equity and social justice, and they want people to belong in the workplace, which is something that honestly, if we all had this, starting young or at all, I feel like people would be so much more, what's the word? I don't know. They might feel a little more relaxed, a little more happy during work. And to some people, they're like, oh, people don't have to be happy at work. But I think you really do, or you should, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're not happy, at least you don't feel like an outsider.
Exactly. Yeah. If you do the math of how many hours you spend at work versus spending at home or with friends or family, it's like you spend the majority of your waking hours at work or doing some kind of work. For me, I'm like, I can't imagine a life in which the place where I show up most frequently, I show up less frequently. I just can't imagine a space where that happens. And I think for me, in the majority of my working experiences, that was true. And I think for a lot of people who do break off and do their own thing, that also is probably true for them. I mean, there's, I can go down a whole rabbit hole about people who decide to leave full-time work and do their own work for themselves or create their own businesses. And, for the most part, it's largely BIPOC folks and people who don't feel like they fit into the mold of what businesses were created to cater to, which is largely white men, cisgendered, so it's, and it's just fascinating because I think sometimes we think of it as just this thing where it's like, oh, well, I just didn't want to work there. And actually, no, it's really, it plays into the systemic nature of the challenges that you and I address in our work on a daily basis.
Oh, so well said. So well said. Okay, so now that we've talked about work, let's switch gears because this is literally a topic that I feel you and I could talk about for hours. 4 hours. So you live outside of DC.
Yep.
Well, now you're in Boston right now, but you live outside of DC. So I have to ask you, in this moment in history, has there been any difference living where you live now versus maybe last year, 5 years ago? And you can interpret that however you want. COVID, our president, the Black Lives Matter, because there's so much going on, and being in the nation's capital, I'm sure that you are exposed to way more than the rest of us in different parts of the country and the world.
Yeah, it's funny. I got that question right after the election. And to be honest, it's like the city, my life, it didn't change that much immediately. There's some little things that are most present for me. It probably just says where my values are. But I used to have a running route that would take me by the White House. And it was one of those things where I'd run in the morning and I was like, wow, I feel extremely privileged to be able to wake up and run by the White House, the monument, like Arlington National Cemetery. And pretty soon after the election, never took that route again. So, and I mean, part of that was like a safety thing. It was really just like, I actually don't trust anymore the people who are outside or near that building. I don't trust people who would want to be close to there. And I mean, maybe that really could be in my own head around things like that. But I just, at that point, I was like, I actually don't feel safe anymore taking this route. And along those lines, I have like 2 Obama shirts that I had dug out. One of them I had gotten, I don't know, maybe a few years ago. And one of them I had from like maybe his first term. Dug those out, thrilled to wear them, and basically haven't put them on since. And it's partly because of the election, but also I haven't seen anything, which is why I say it hasn't directly affected me, but I've heard stories of my friends passing by, places in Arlington, which is a pretty blue area, but seeing people with like white hoods on, or hearing about all kinds of hate crime, like, yeah. So,
hoods?
Yeah. So it's, yeah.
Arlington? Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It was a few years ago. I think it was somewhere near like George Mason for a little bit. I don't think it was connected to George Mason. I'm not necessarily saying that, but it was around that area. And so, yeah, it's just things like that where it's like you start to recognize as people get more comfortable. And I think this is why I say I don't think it's much different than where anybody else is experiencing this in the country. But I'm like, you start to recognize that the people who you think of as like, oh, those people, or the other people who think and feel very differently than me when it comes to politics, that like, oh, they're somewhere else in the country. It's like, no, we are all together, maybe in different proportions, but we're all together. So yeah, that's a little bit of a long-winded answer to your question.
Excuse me. I really like what you just said, that, we some people may have the perception that those people are in different parts of the country, like let's say the South or Texas. But you realize, I love what you said, they're just in different proportions. They're here, just in different proportions. And I also want to hit on what you said about, it may be in your head as far as not feeling safe running by the White House or wearing the Obama shirt. I just had, I just met with a few Black women. We were like social distancing in Oakland. Like, so we all kind of sat in a circle in the park. And so one of the women brought up the fact that she is looking at purchasing a gun. So this is a woman probably in her late 30s, early 40s, who said she's never once, you know, I don't want to say she's anti-gun, but she, you know, didn't really think that a gun was necessary. She didn't think it was necessary for people to bear arms. But she said now, because of this moment in history, because of this climate, she's really thinking about becoming a gun owner to protect herself. She had just moved from Texas. She's originally from California, but she spent a long time in Texas, I believe, getting her PhD. And a white supremacist had beat a Black woman to death, like just, I guess, punching her in the face. And she said after that happened, and you know, it's amazing that we never heard about it, probably because there's too many instances that the news cannot cover, which is terrifying. And actually, my sister and a girlfriend of mine were just talking about today, a Black man in Texas was murdered by the police. And we were commenting on how this is happening literally every day. It's always been happening every day, but now with technology and the news media, it's happening every day. And so I know quite a few Black women that are like, we need to protect ourselves. So it's not in your head. It's not in my head. I recently moved to a more conservative part of California. I moved from Oakland to Sacramento, which is only an hour and a half away. Night and day, I see Trump posters. I saw like a Trump parade on the highway. It was about 8 to 10 trucks with American flags and a Trump flag, and like 8 to 10 trucks, all with 3 flags, 2 American flags, huge Trump flag. I have a Black Lives Matter mask, and I literally have to ask myself, am I safe to wear this mask when I'm going, you know, to the grocery store? And yeah, so I think I just wanted to reiterate to you and to anyone else listening, particularly if you are of color, particularly if you are Black, even more specifically if you are a Black woman, that your thoughts of your safety are not in your head, not in your head at all. And, you know, for me, that's very difficult because I, like you, have questioned that. I've grown up very safe. I've grown up feeling very safe. And now in this climate, I am literally looking at everyone. I'm not making friends as readily because I don't know what your politics are.
Yep.
And like you said, even in a place like DC, which for me, I've always thought it was pretty liberal and blue, and it used to be called Chocolate City, not anymore. My sister and her partner, my nephew, lived there, and they are, you know, they question who they're around, who their 2-year-old son is around. It's amazing. And I know this has been going on since we were kidnapped and brought here, but I particularly feel now Black people are on edge.
Yeah, definitely.
You feel the same way that your friends and family are a little more hyper vigilant about who they associate with, where they go, what kind of shirts they wear. Like for you not to be able to wear an Obama shirt for fear of retribution, or me to wear Black Lives Matter. I mean, this is our country too, but we're scared to express ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I definitely, so just to answer your question, yes, definitely. The people in my life are feeling way more nervous. I mean, there's another family member who, I think it was shortly after the election, when a colleague said to my family member, he basically, out of the blue, mind you, it was a white man who said this to my family member who's a Black man, and basically was like, you know, if it were to come down to a war between us, we would win. that was kind of the moment. And then, you know, I think he may have said a couple of other things and then kind of kept it moving. But I just, like, I forgot exactly what it was, but he said something where it was close to, like, you know, we've been storing up artillery for a while and we have, you know, resources. If it really came down to it, I don't think your people would get it together. And I just, like, I mean, it's like
It is
all,
place.
exactly. And also it's like, then there's the power dynamics you have involved with, like, both positional identity power. I mean, but it's like all you really need is one story like that to make you be like, okay, I'm going to be very, very thoughtful, careful, intentional about how I show up, where I go, who I'm talking with, what I'm saying. Like, and it's just not a reality that anybody should be living in at all. Like,
and let's talk about the trauma that you said it was your uncle, your family member?
Male family member, I'm going to leave them nameless, but
the trauma that your male family member had to experience in that moment and forevermore whenever he sees his white male colleague who is even thinking about a race war, thinking about it,
right,
and strategizing. Like, what's going on in his mind?
Exactly. And I mean, like, and to follow up that story, like, this family member has since left that company. So, I mean, and I mean, I think that goes back to our point, though, that we were talking about at the beginning of just, like, what does it mean when we can't show up authentically in our workplaces? And I think we were talking about it from, you know, one perspective of just being able to be our authentic selves, but, like, there are actual moments like these taking place in workplaces. And I just, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's in workplaces, it's in just general communities, it's in, like, places of worship and spiritual gatherings. I mean, it's pervasive, but not to totally take us down.
I had not a similar instance. I'm not going to compare it, but I had someone text me. She was a white woman. Text me that she was very upset with Gavin Newsom, who's the governor of California, and the bill for reparations. The bill was, I think, forming a committee to look at reparations for, was it descendants of slaves in California, African-American Californians. I'm totally butchering this bill. And I automatically froze up, right? Because this was a white woman expressing her displeasure about reparations, or at least this was my first thought, that she was expressing her displeasure about reparations in California, which made me think, oh my goodness, what else does she have displeasure? My heart sped up, you know, it was literally fight or flight. And I was like, I don't know what to do. This is scary. This is someone, that I trust. And we ended up texting and going. I literally had to take a deep breath and calm down and go a little bit deeper. And it wasn't that she was a racist that didn't want reparations. I think she just didn't understand, which we all have some levels of ignorance. But the point being is I'm finding these situations happening more and more often, not only to myself, but to the people, around me. And like you said, your male family member, that you don't know who you're going to work with and or having lunch with. And then all of a sudden they may come out. I mean, it could be your boss, could be a family member of someone you love. And it's very traumatic. I've also had discussions with other Black women about leaving the country. Yep. But then another Black woman brought up the point that that's a privilege to even think about leaving the country. Like, for me to really map out a plan, save up the money to move to Ghana or the Bahamas or Nigeria or Australia, whatever. That is a huge privilege, because what about people here that are stuck? They're stuck with the racial terrorism. They're stuck with, hopefully not for long, but with the president who almost is endorsing the Proud Boys. He's not saying white supremacy is bad. And so all of these thoughts are swirling in my head, and I often wonder, how did we get here?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And do you have, especially in the work you do you find people that are not Black asking, how did we get here? Or thinking that it all started with Trump? Like, how do you answer those questions?
Yeah. I mean, in the question of like, I'm defining here in your question as like this particular moment in time, just the things that we've all been talking about. So, you know, I on one level, I was, I don't want to say I was happy. One bright side I could see to having the occupant be elected to the position he's holding is that, yeah, I can't bring myself sometimes. So, but yeah, I mean, one bright side is that I think when Obama got elected, we all went to this place of being post-racial, and you know, we've overcome these issues of racism, and why are we still talking about this? We have a Black president. It clearly isn't a problem anymore. And on one level, I was like, this is still a problem. We can't do anything about something we don't acknowledge or see. So seeing it now, at least for some people, shines light on what's actually underneath the surface. I think, you know, I think we got to a place where it just became taboo and unacceptable to say some of the things that people now clearly, the examples that we've both given, feel very comfortable saying and doing. And, you know, I think it also kind of goes to the point that you brought up around with the person who you were talking about. You were like, I just don't think she understood. And I feel like we sometimes come at these conversations with this idea of, you know, how can I get this other person to see things my way? And how can I get them to understand these things? And on one level, I feel like it's the ability to have conversations around questions and around inquiry and curiosity. A colleague of mine recently, we were having a conversation about the value of childlike curiosity when you're having these conversations. Like a curiosity without judgment, a curiosity without, you know, jumping to a conclusion of what to do next, but really just I'm genuinely curious. I want to hear and I want to learn. And so, I mean, this doesn't totally answer the question of how we got here, but, you know, I think if we are now in this space where a lot of these views are coming to light and people feel more comfortable sharing them, if there are opportunities for us to be able to be in two-way or, you know, multiple way dialogue around, let me understand your perspective, let me share mine, how can we create spaces for both of them? You know, I think that's one thing that we can do to get a step closer to actually creating change and creating greater understanding and being able to have conversations rather than these debates and arguments that go back and forth.
I agree. I really like what you said about childlike curiosity. And I'll be completely honest and transparent. Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it honestly depends on the person I'm speaking with. If it is someone that I have a relationship with, or they seem open, yes, it's a lot easier for me to have that childlike curiosity. Like, tell me why. Like, this woman was saying how she thinks we should support the occupant just because they're the occupant of the country. And I said, okay, you know, and I was like, that's fine. And I said, so what are a couple things that you really agree, or, you know, a few things that you think he's done well that would, you know, cause you to support him? Mm-hmm. She was like, you know, I don't know. He's just the president, so I feel like we should support him. Yeah. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I nothing.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like the thing you're getting at there too is it's like the questioning of our own assumptions. In like, for her, it sounds like, oh, the assumption is if this person is in this particular position of power, my role is then to support that person. And if you're not supporting them, you know, I don't know what that would mean for her, but it's clearly not what you would want to be doing. It's not the ideal state. So, I mean, to your point, just even asking the question, and her being in a space where she felt comfortable saying, I don't know, which is like the scariest 3 words for adults to say. But, you know, her feeling comfortable enough to say that to you is huge. And the last thing that you were saying that I think is a huge piece of this is the relationship between the people. You know, in the work that I'm doing, I'm still kind of playing around with the different ways that I can convey this idea, but the relationship piece and being able to build trust and being able to be in community with one another and have those authentic sharing spaces and just relationship with one another is so key, because without those, you know, you can't, like you were saying, it's like you don't feel comfortable having those kind of conversations. And then how do we get to actual change without it?
Right. So let me pose this question to you. Getting to actual change, do you think if this occupant who is currently in office right now, let's say he doesn't win, do you think the white supremacists that back him will slow down or kind of mute themselves without him in office? Or do you think they will kind of grow and enrage if, wait for it, if we have a woman of color in the second highest office in the country?
Yeah.
What do you, and this is something that I haven't really pondered and thought about, and I don't watch the news that often. I figure something's very important. Someone will let me, because it's damaging. It's damaging. But I feel like after she got the nomination, we're not really talking about her. Kamala Harris. What do you think?
So I'll say those 3. I don't know. I actually hadn't really, I mean, I like, it's one of those things where I'm like, whatever happens, there's going to be some kind of shift. Like if Biden wins, there's going to be some kind of shift. If the occupant stays in office, I feel like there's going to be some other kind of like, you know, second level of whatever state we're currently in. So, I mean, I guess the only hope I can have for whatever of these outcomes takes place is that it brings us closer to a place of being able to continue unpacking and being in dialogue. And yeah, my fear, the thing that I don't want to see happen is which I imagine would probably be more likely if Biden and Kamala won, it would be like for people to then take those views and go back underground with them and not want to share. Because I think that's where they end up being the most damaging.
Okay. So do you think it's more beneficial that we have these people that are above ground, who are very vocal, who are having parades on the highway with their trucks and marching with their tiki torches? Do you think it benefits communities such as ours, and also the work that we do, that this is now upfront and open?
Yeah. I mean, I think my general orientation to most things is like, how is this something that we can utilize or benefit from? That's like a life orientation, not just for work. But yeah, so I'm not going to say that having those kinds of demonstrations is beneficial to our communities. I think it creates a lot of trauma and a lot of fear. And if people do feel comfortable at least vocalizing their views in ways that are conducive to having conversations about it, that's kind of what I'm here for. But yeah, I mean, I think it's better. You can't address something, again, that you can't see, that you don't talk about. So if it's something that we can at least work with and engage with in some way, I say that allows for possibility. But yeah, no, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a good thing to have people saying things that makes people feel afraid and really be concerned for their own well-being. So, I mean, I think the dialogue is where I land and what ends up being important.
The ability to have that dialogue. Mm-hmm. And you say to me, it just hits me as very like enlightened, very open, right? Which a lot of times when we have discussions about politics and race, people shut down, understandably. It's these are difficult things to talk about. I remember the old adage, when you go to a party, you don't talk about sex, politics, or religion.
Yep.
Now, race.
Yep.
You probably talk more about sex, but not about race.
Exactly.
More of an open topic now than race or religion.
Yeah.
What is like the swirling around in your head dealing with this? And I'm just gonna like preface it with COVID. You know, obviously you and I are on Zoom right now. One, because we're on opposite ends of the country, but two, definitely because of COVID. And you know, I've been really looking at the intersection of a worldwide pandemic with the uprisings, and now with the occupant maybe having COVID. I don't know what to believe. And I've heard all kinds of awesome theories about it. Some which I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, and some I'm like, oh, that's not good.
Oh, I gotta hear these theories at some point. I said I gotta hear these theories at some point, but continue.
Oh my goodness. I mean, there's so many. Or so have you not heard? I'm a definite conspiracy theorist, but I've just been reading Twitter, and even with people with no conspiracies, definitely are sharing why they think he has come out saying that he has COVID. Because in my mind, it seems like it would be detrimental, but in other people's mind, he may be using this for the election. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, I'm like you. I pretty much stay far away from the news. I leave that to my fiance to kind of brief me on what's happening. I can't take it in. But yeah, no, I hear you. I feel like there's a lot of different scenarios that people can come up with, but I interrupted you. I want to hear your question.
No, that's fine. Just about what is kind of top of mind, maybe this week or this month, about what's going on in the world. And there's so much going on in the world, big and little.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What is going on in my mind these days?
It could be something great.
Yeah. I mean, I am, okay, so I will say in relation to the COVID and occupant thing, I am very curious about how this is all going to play out. I feel like the next, couple of weeks will be interesting in terms of watching what happens and seeing how people interpret it and the impact it has. So I'll just say I'm in a space of kind of, it's like that moment in a movie where it's like I'm on the edge of my seat. What's going to happen? I've been feeling a little bit like that in my life recently. Yep. So yeah, that's one thing swirling around. And then, yeah, I mean, I hate to be like this, like single topic person, but I mean, I end up doing the work that I do because I care about it genuinely. So, I think the other thing that's been playing around in my mind is just like, so I've been, all right, here's one. So I've been like, so since June and since the wake of George Floyd's murder and more of the demonstrations for Black Lives Matter, my services have been in extremely high demand, like more so than any other time that I've been doing this work. And I think my colleagues, and I'm sure you've probably been experiencing it, but yeah, so a lot of people who I know are doing this work are experiencing the same thing. And what I've been playing around with is related to self-care. So I have, in the time that I've been doing consulting work, it's been, I've done moonlighting, freelancing, like all kinds of different structures for this, had part-time things with freelance things. And I'm now in a space, freelancing while in grad school, I'm now in a space where I don't have any other real competing priorities of that size. So I'm now able to focus just on my consulting work exclusively. And so I've been playing with this idea of capacity and what does capacity look like for me. So recently, I think I've probably, with my work, gotten to like over capacity, which on one level, in order to figure out where my capacity is, I think I needed to figure out where I was, when I was under and when I was over. So I had a conversation right before this one where I was talking with a colleague of mine about my relationship to no, and just how challenging it has been for me to be in a space of telling people no, when I, especially with work, so often operated in this space of like, you know, opportunities arising that I was excited about and that were coming right at a time when another opportunity was ending. And, you know, being able to pretty much have the luxury of saying yes to most of the things that came along. And so I've been playing around with like, what's my relationship to no? How do I tell people no? What does my capacity look like? What is my relationship to self-care and this thing that we call work-life balance, which I am convinced is not actually a balancing scale. And just like, at this stage in my own growth, what are the changes and transformations that I want to make to have my life and the way that I show up both in work and personal life be something that is sustainable and gives me life. So not totally a like topic of the day or society, but that's what's been swirling around in my mind.
I feel we are almost out of time. I want to be respectful of your time, but I feel like we need to have another entire hour talking about self-care and the importance of self-care for everyone, but particularly Black women. And I am finding so many podcasts, so many websites, so many YouTube channels and Instagram people that are advocating self-care for Black women. And I was like, have these always been here, or have I just been working too hard and never investigated it? It's really nice, you know, especially if, you know, particularly, and I'm going to speak as a Black woman because that's all I know, that I have been taught that I need to work twice as hard to get to where I need to be, or that I need to work twice as hard as everyone else just to prove that I'm worthy to be in the room. And so the self-care, I'm so glad you brought that up, because now that I am beginning on the journey of taking care of myself, I'm realizing how much I have not taken care of myself. Right? And I'm a big encourager. You and I have even talked about it. Where I'm like, what are you doing to take care of yourself? And you know, I'm into my adult coloring books with my glitter gel pens, and you know, doing yoga, and I'm meditating more. And so I am so happy to hear you talk about self-care. That's a great topic.
Oh, I love that.
Own episode.
Definitely does. I'm like, we could do a part 2.
Right? Definitely. Do you have any closing words for our audience? Any quotes that you want to impart, or knowledge, because you have so much knowledge and wisdom?
Thank you.
Spot. Sorry about that.
All good. I mean, at this moment in time, and I don't know when people will be watching this, but my hope for whoever is watching is just to be encouraged in whatever space you're in. I don't know if you are in a space where this conversation around race, equity, diversity, inclusion is something that resonates with you, if it's something that you know, you are dipping your toe into for the first time, or if you're someone who is passionate about some of this work, or if you're, you know, you love Kim and you're watching. I just say be encouraged. It's been, I think this season, the last few months, the last 4 years has been one that I think has challenged us as people, particularly Americans, but I think it also extends outside of America, but has challenged us in a number of different ways. So, you know, I think at this time, that's one thing that's been coming up in conversations I've been having is around hope. So to impart, I encourage and impart that on anybody who's listening, just to stay in places of encouragement and hope.
Oh, that's a word. That's a word. So I would like to end on that note. You can find Jillian Hubbard at Jillian Hubbard Consulting, and that was JillianHConsulting.com.
Yep.
I'll put it in the show notes. Awesome. And thank you so much. I am so honored to be able to take this much of your time. Really appreciate it. And whoo, you dropped some gems.
This was a gift. There was no taking of time. This was an absolute gift to be in the space with you, to be featured here, to be in dialogue with you and community with you. So I'm overjoyed. I feel privileged and honored that you would ask to have me be here. So thank you so much just for creating this space and for the dialogue.
That's awesome. Okay, until next time, our episode on self-care.
Part 2.
Part 2. I'm putting it out there because we all need that. All right.
It's going to be in the universe now.
It's in the universe. The universe will provide a time for us to do this again. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Audience, thank you for being here. I will leave all the information about Jillian and her awesome website designer in the show notes, and where you can contact Jillian for some consulting, because we all need that. We all need that. All right, lady. I will talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.